Hey YouTube, welcome to Wild Blue. So what we got here today is 5 of the most infamous Nazi conspiracy theories. This first one here is that Hitler survived the war, World War II that is. He moved on to Argentina, fled the country on a U-boat as the Russians were closing in on him. So the currently accepted version of history is that Adolf Hitler committed suicide with the gun-cyanide combo along with his woman Eva Braun. And this all happened in his bunker as the Soviets were closing in on Berlin. And the reason they think this is the case is because the Soviets claim they found his body and they determined it was him. So why do some people think that he survived? Well, for one thing, though the Soviets claim they found the body has never been produced since then. We don't know what happened to it. And even the body that they described didn't really match his appearance. And it was all burnt, so they couldn't really tell some of the most important features about it. But there have been reports all throughout the years, the past 70 years, that he somehow fled the country to Argentina or somewhere in South America, and he was living down there for the remainder of his days. Some declassified FBI documents show that he lived down there in Argentina for another 30 years after the war, living there in peace and community with a bunch of other Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. And then there's a declassified CIA report that said he moved to Colombia for a few years in 1956, living under the name of Adolf Hitler, and there was even a picture of him. Joseph Stalin, the former dictator of the Soviet Union, told President Truman during the 1950s that Hitler had been captured by the Soviets and was in Russian hands. And you know what? There were even some other pictures of him taken before his death, apparently. But the fact is, now there's just no way to know. That's why it's a conspiracy theory. It is possible that he escaped, but there was a French team that identified a jawbone that may have been his later on. So, you know, there's evidence to support both sides of this. But that just may be the best evidence that he actually did die in that bunker. Number 4, the Nazi UFO conspiracy theory, the Nazi bell. Die Glocke is the German name for it. The bell. This thing was supposedly some sort of aircraft developed from UFO alien technology. It's extremely advanced, capable of anti-gravity flight, and some even say it was used for time travel. Using this bell, the Nazis apparently traveled to the moon and Mars, and even beyond, possibly even to another solar system. It's like Hitler's Star Trek. The bell is described literally as a bell-shaped aircraft, about 15 foot tall and 12 foot wide. It uses unknown fuel source known as Serum 525. Kind of look like those red cherry goo that they have in the chocolate-covered cherries. There's also reports that strange anomalies occurred anywhere within 500 feet or so of this aircraft. So what the question comes down to, is this thing actually real? And that's what we're looking here today at. There's never been any evidence so far that anti-gravity technology is real and that we have made any sort of scientific progress towards introducing it into our engineering of our aircraft. But according to this theory, the Nazis had help from some kind of alien life forms that provided this technology and showed them how to turn it into something they could use. And with the help of the top Nazi scientists, they developed this Bell aircraft that was supposed to be used to turn the tide of the war against the Allies. But you know, it obviously didn't help them in World War II. Due to the other blunders Hitler made and their ineptitude and their lack of resources, they ultimately lost the war. But is there any evidence that exists to support this theory? Let's take a look at some of the findings over the years that we've got. Jacob Sporenberg, he was a former SS officer. He talked about the bell in his trials for war crimes at Nuremberg after World War II. He said that at least 60 scientists were killed to prevent the knowledge of this weapon of war from getting out. So that's why there's not much to see on it, because it was a big cover-up by the Nazi government before the war was over. They didn't want this falling into Allies' hands, because that would have been detrimental to their overall objectives. There was another guy, Charles Deschaux. He's a German author and painter. He's got some books. I'm gonna do on a video on him later here. But he had described some stuff like this in the doodles he did of craft of this nature, and he was part of this Sonora Era Club that was geared towards developing these kind of things. It's kind of a mysterious secret society, so there's a lot of interesting information we're going to cover in that in a future video. Some crazy and interesting stuff there. Then you got the Foo Fighters. It ain't the band that y'all are familiar with. These are what the band was actually named after. These balls of light that would follow pilots around in World War II. These were Army Air Corps pilots, and even some of the Nazis pilots experienced these things. They would fly around, hang around on the wingtips, and just kind of keep pace with them. Maybe that was a bell. Maybe it was flying in formation with the Nazis, and the other pilots in their formations just didn't know what it was. Or maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But in the end, you know, there's a lot of lost history here. There's been a few books written about it from second, third, and fourth hand sources, but ain't nothing concrete about it at all. You know, I know UFO hunters did something on it back in the day. They found these sort of concrete structures that they surmised could have been some sort of containment field for the craft. But as it turns out, I think upon further research, they discovered it was just the base of some kind of water tower. Ain't nothing special about it. Maybe it was destroyed. Maybe the United States government kept it for itself and used it to develop its own sort of alien technology capabilities. Maybe the Nazis destroyed it before they could let it fall into Allies' hands. You just don't know. And maybe they even took it to their alternate base of operations, which brings us to our next topic of discussion. Number 3, a Nazi base in Antarctica. So this idea of a Nazi base in Antarctica has been floating around for many years. Antarctica is a big frozen wasteland. No one lives there except for penguins and seals and some birds other than penguins. People will go there every once in a while and do some research, but there ain't no permanent residence. It ain't no country that you're familiar with. It's just a continent. Thick sheets of ice, snow. It's basically a frozen desert. Inhospitable to the average human. Temperatures well below freezing, well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. People come for research and leave because it sucks there. But the Nazis, they visited this place too. Prior to World War II, they had a number of expeditions into this place. They coined New Schwabland, and that was kind of their claim on this territory. As many countries were traveling the globe in the early 1900s, laying claim to all these places that were, you know, the leftovers pretty much. You had the French and the Americans, they all had their little claims here in Antarctica, basically dividing it up like a big pie. But the Nazis, they had a number of expeditions here to New Swabia, New Schwabland. They had a couple different names for it. And these expeditions took place in 1938 and 1939, right as World War II was about to begin. They mapped the area, had a number of flights surveilling the land, but they never established any sort of permanent settlement there. It was like they just came and then they left, at least as far as we know. But we're going to look into some other theories here about what's really there underneath the ice. So this is where this theory comes in. The Nazis just didn't build some kind of settlement there. They built an actual base in the ice. And the base is still there to this day as the Nazis prepare for the Fourth Reich, the final rise of the Nazi Empire as they take over the world one last time. Preparing, waiting, growing stronger as the inevitable World War II approaches. But this time, they've got all kinds of alien alliances and alien technology that they're going to use. Theories of a reptilian alien base that was already there that they sort of co-opted, and you know, they're colluding there with the aliens that are living there now. They're all working together with the Nazis. Hitler was cryogenically frozen, has been reanimated and brought back to life as some kind of Hitler cyborg. So where did this idea come from? And is there any evidence to actually support its existence? So we know that the Nazis were looking in this area with their expeditions, and we know that many escaped to Argentina after the war and lived out their days there. But you know, Argentina is just a short distance away there from Antarctica in the southern end. You know, they had somewhere to hide out in Antarctica if Argentina ever fell through, and that's where the idea of this base comes in. But looking at the actual evidence, there ain't much. Just some correlating bits here and there. You know, over 40 U-boats remain unaccounted for after the war. Their most advanced electro boats. You know, maybe they scuttled them. Maybe they fell into the Allies' hands and were studied and never really revealed to have been captured. We don't really know for sure, but maybe they were taken to some new submarine pens that were built there in Antarctica. In 1947, there was a major research operation conducted by the U.S. Navy, led by Admiral Byrd, down there to Antarctica. It had thousands of troops and planes and boats, and the question is, why was such a large operation dedicated to going down there? And it seems like we really didn't get a whole lot out of it. The theory there is that the Americans went down to root out the final remaining Nazis, but you know, without any sort of hard evidence, there's nothing really to say for sure what happened. And some guys have looked on Google Earth and claim to have found entrances to these underground bases there in Antarctica, but you know, those photos are so low resolution down there in the middle of nowhere, it's just difficult to really make anything out except for some brown splotches in the ice. And without actually being able to go down there and see what it is, there just ain't no way of knowing. And here's the next conspiracy theory. Hitler was installed by the elites. Yeah, the elites as in the business magnates, the robber barons of the old days, their families that live on. Maybe not installed by them, but he was one of them. This is another one that's starting to gain some traction in the conspiracy theory world. Was Hitler actually one of the Rothschilds? One of the families that makes up the members of the Illuminati? You know, there is some circumstantial evidence that can be used to support this. So here it is, Hitler's dad, Alois Hitler, originally Alois Schicklgruber. He was born to a lowly peasant woman named Maria Anna Schicklberger. She was just some kind of servant chick who happened to be working for the Rothschild family at the time that Alois was said to have been born. This leads to the idea that Hitler's dad was either Solomon or Anselm Rothschild. It's obvious looking at the old Fuhrer that he wasn't one of the Aryans that he so touted above all else. He had the dark hair and the dark eyes. He didn't have the blonde hair and the blue eyes that he so loved. And many of his features would even lead one to believe that he was actually Jewish. And although the highest ranking Nazis had to have detailed paperwork showing their lineage to the Aryans that came before them, Hitler didn't have to do that because he was in charge. He kind of waived that requirement for himself, which tells you he obviously had something to hide. And so there's thoughts of, you know, where Anselm and Solomon would have been, and ideas of, you know, what times they would have been around, and what times they would have been around his grandmother Maria. But there's just no hard evidence for it. And the last conspiracy theory we got here is that Nazis plan to harness the power of ancient religious and mythological relics and use that power to take over the world. Now, we've all seen Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade with Indiana Jones, but you know, there's a lot of truth to that. There were definitely many attempts by the Nazis to grab hold and gather these relics that were associated with great religious significance and mythological relevance to both Christianity and a lot of the Norse mythology as well. And they believed these things had some sort of supernatural power that could gather together, and maybe if they combined them all into one sort of big weapon, they'd be able to take over the world with these things. And that included things like the Holy Grail and the Thor's hammer, also the Spear of Destiny. All these things they believed you could gather together and create a super weapon with them. Himmler, one of Hitler's highest ranking officials, he wanted to use Wewelsburg Castle as some kind of modern day Camelot. And this would be the source of all their power. And the SS were like the Teutonic Knights of the Crusade in his mind. But you know, maybe it's a good thing they wasted all this time trying to find these relics, because ultimately they failed to succeed in their goal. They lost the war, and they were eradicated from the world. There's a lot of occult history behind the Nazis, and it would just make sense that the SS would believe something like this would be something they could use. And along with the search for all these relics, Hitler was prolifically stealing all kinds of artwork throughout Europe and gathering them. And he kept a lot of it in salt mines in the Alps. He wanted to build a super museum there, and he would be the curator. Ultimately, all those plans failed, and all of it's been relegated to the annals of history for us to look back and try and figure out what went on with all these conspiracy theories that are out there. None of them have been proven true. None of them may ever be proven true. But we're all going to continue to find out, search what we can, and figure out what we can. So with that said, we're going to close out this video. If y'all enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Check out our Facebook page and our website, wildbluetvstories.tv. If y'all got any stories y'all like to share with Wild Blue TV, send them to wildbluetvstories@gmail.com. We'll take a look and see if y'all want to be on our show, or maybe we could do a video with y'all, some kind of interview. With that said, Wild Blue out.